Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining IBTTA's Global Road Safety Week 2024. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Laura Chace, President and CEO of ITS America. In this role, her focus is to promote policies that advance the development and safe deployment of intelligent transportation technologies throughout the United States. Laura brings more than 15 years of trade association experience, having previously worked at U.S. Telecom and the American Trucking Associations, which is also one of my former employers. Early in her career, she served in the Clinton administration at the U.S. Department of Justice and in the White House. Laura, thanks for being here. It's great to have you with us and have the chance to speak with you today.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
Well, Laura, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to be involved with ITS America.
Sure, I'm happy to. Well, I'm actually not a transportation professional in that I did not spend the early years of my career in transportation. But I have spent it in this, Washington, D.C. based advocacy and policy world. And as you mentioned, I spent some time in the telecom industry and I spent some time at American Trucking Associations. And so ITS America is actually, in many ways, the perfect blend, right, of technology and transportation. And when you start to look at where transportation is really going, and you look at ITS technologies, which are really, founded in this ability to communicate information across the road networks and to other road users, it ends up being just this perfect mix of a lot of my passions, right? Incorporating emerging technologies, but in an effort to make roads safer, right? To make transportation and mobility easier, more equitable, cleaner. And those are the reasons I think why ITS America speaks so well to my background and to the work that we do here.
I think a lot of people, if you ask who are in transportation or transportation related fields, probably many of them fell into this, as I did. So it's not unusual to find policy makers, thought leaders, advocates like yourself and myself in these roles. So while we're thinking, we think of highways as concrete and steel, critical corridors being transformed by technology. Can you paint us a picture of how technology is changing highway travel? And most importantly, how is it making highways safer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, we're focusing on a little bit on highways today, but ITS America does focus on multimodal transportation, right? So from the highway to your local roads to, transit agencies and different modes that are all operating on a transportation network. But when you start to think about the technologies that are available today and how they're being incorporated, you realize that we're really moving from this world of physical, concrete and steel, to this world where we have communications technology, artificial intelligence technology, the use of data, automation, other technologies that are incorporated into this physical environment, right? That actually augment this physical environment with this digital layer. And that's really the sort of world in which ITS America really advocates right now, is how do we ensure that we are investing appropriately in that technology and digital layer so that we actually can improve safety on our highways by using these technologies to better understand our environment, to have more time to make safer driving decisions, and to make sure that we're all traveling in the safest possible way.
Laura, you recently testified before the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee on Surface Transportation, Maritime Freight, and Ports. That's a mouthful. But I want to read back to you something you said in that testimony that really resonates with me. You said technology can take us from a reactive system to a proactive system that addresses issues before they result in a death. A proactive approach recognizes the importance of investing in tools that help us gather information about our transportation system and infrastructure, communicate safety critical information in real time, and process and derive insights from that information at speed, providing agencies with crucial tools to make planning decisions, enact safety countermeasures, and monitor the status of their system. Say more about that. That seems to be like right in the wheelhouse of ITS America.
Yeah, so that was really the crux of my message, and thank you for sharing that. Which really is that we have this ability to be more proactive. So the current method that typically is used in transportation with regard to safety, I would describe as a reactive method, right? So a fatality or multiple fatalities happen in a certain, maybe it's an intersection or a segment of roadway. And then, the agency then looks to say, okay, how can I address that challenge? Now we have things like vehicle to everything communications, which allows road users to communicate safety critical information in milliseconds, right, in real time. We have technologies like automation, whether we're talking about partial automation that's available in your vehicle today, that helps drivers, or full automation, right, which is you see being deployed in certain cities, right, by the likes of Waymo and other companies. Um, you have artificial intelligence and the use of data that can be derived from different sensors and different technology that's present in our transportation network, where now we have the ability to understand, well, you know what? We see a lot of hard braking in this one area. We see a lot of
Mm,
excessive speeding in this one area. What's going on?
mm.
So what it does is it allows us to intervene before a fatality happens and to make those adjustments to our system to actually make it safer. We don't have to wait for tragedy now. We can actually be proactive. And I think, that's what excites me, and the power of a lot of these technology tools that are at our disposal today is it does allow us to do things in a much more proactive manner.
Speaking of being proactive, I'm really interested in being proactive, sort of like between the ears of a driver. One of the big themes of our Global Road Safety Week is be safe together. That's sort of our tagline. And then principles of empathy and respect for other people on the road. When we get out on the highway, we're surrounded by 2,000 pounds of metal, and we tend to think that we're alone and, we're insulated from all these other drivers. And in some cases, we're not even aware of these other drivers. But the key is for us to demonstrate empathy and respect and to recognize that every action you take behind the wheel of a vehicle affects the safety of everybody else on the highway. So I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that ITS systems can help influence drivers to avoid speeding and avoid distraction and avoid being impaired?
Well, I think so. There's several ways. So you do have technology like vehicle to everything technology, which I mentioned before, right? Which can alert drivers of what's happening around them, right? It can alert you while you're on the highway, there's a crash ahead, you can't see it yet, and it can alert you so that you have time to slow down and you're not slamming on the brakes, right? Many of your listeners will understand, oh, I've been in that scenario, right? Where all of a sudden I have to slam on the brakes. Vehicle to everything communications can alert you. It can also give warnings, right? For example, let's say you're in a rural area, in a rural highway, and let's say there's inclement weather that you can't yet see, but it's right up ahead, the road's slippery. It can give you that warning. It can give you a warning about a curve speed, right? So that you're going too fast actually into that curve, which is a real big issue, especially on rural highways. Automation, we've talked about that. Even partial automation can give drivers tools to help them um, address, speed limits, but also stay on the road. One of the things I mentioned in my testimony was, particularly in the rural areas, lane departure is one of the leading causes of fatalities.
Right,
And so,
right.
we have technologies today in vehicles, lane keep assist, lane departure warning. Those are driver assistance technologies that can really help improve safety. And then the final one I'll mention is happening, right here in Virginia, right in the DMV, which is variable speed limits. And this has been really successful on I-95 in actually improving safety. And it's the ability to use ITS technologies based on road conditions, based on traffic and or other conditions, maybe it's weather or other external conditions, to adjust the speed limit dynamically.
Hmm.
And again, drivers pay attention to that, right? If the speed limit might be reduced for a period of time to, let's say down from 60 to 45 miles per hour, drivers are actually adhering to that, and it is improving safety significantly. And so those are things that can be applied, quite frankly, in many jurisdictions and improve safety.
I love the idea of the variable speed limits and getting people to adjust their speed to the conditions that are out there on the highway. And you mentioned, being able to alert people to changing weather conditions. Maybe there's black ice that's developing and people aren't aware of it. I really like that aspect of the technology. In your testimony, you also put your finger on a big issue affecting safety, and that has to do with funding. And you used a statistic. I forget exactly what it was, but it just sort of like a very small percentage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding for surface transportation going into technology. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the statistic is that it's less than 0.1% of the
Wow.
total funding in the infrastructure law is dedicated to technology deployment. And we know, as we go back to sort of the beginning of our conversation where we talked about the fact that our transportation system really is evolving from one of just, concrete and steel to one that is really augmented and supplemented by these digital tools. We really need to be making it not only easier, but to make it um, frankly not a choice, right, to invest in technology. That investments in technology need to be viewed as critical as investments in repaving a roadway, right, or reinforcing a bridge. And right now, the way our funding and policy works, it is obviously skewed towards the physical infrastructure that we've all, invested in for decades. And while we certainly need to continue to invest in the physical, I don't want anyone to get the impression I don't think we need to continue that. We do. 0.1%, just remember that number, right? We don't need a lot, but we do need to increase the amount that we are investing in technology because it allows us, again, to be proactive with safety. And I will also say, I truly believe that if we really want to meet our collective national goal of Vision Zero, meaning no one dies on our roadways,
Right.
I don't think we get there without investments in technology. I think that is critical. So how can we start to change some of our transportation policy and funding so that we have more money going towards these technology investments? And this is critical, in my view, that we start to incorporate technology from the planning stage of a project, right? And not just maybe towards the end of a project or saying, well, I have some additional budget here, so maybe I'll add some sensors, to this roadway. It really needs to be incorporated from the very beginning, initial concept and planning stages, all the way through the construction, all the way to, the operation of that transportation asset once it's built and operationalized.
Laura, let's talk about young people. They are the future of our country, and we know that young drivers are disproportionately involved in accidents and injuries and fatalities. You have two sons, twin sons, who just graduated from high school, and you have a daughter who's about to go into high school. Tell us about what are some of the conversations you have with your children around speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving, and how can ITS technologies influence that?
Yeah, well, so what I'll say to you, which is maybe common among many parents and teenager conversations, right? And I'll preface this with, I have really good kids who are rule followers. But honestly, some of the conversations I've had with my children as they learn to drive were, well, I followed all the rules, but others drivers didn't,
Hmm.
right? And they noticed that.
Right.
And
Right.
so, I'm not going over the speed limit, but these other people are speeding by me, or, someone didn't, blew through a stop sign or whatever the behavior is. And they see that and they notice that. So really, how do we message to young people the importance of following the rules? It's not just about following the rules, right? It is about saving lives. It is about operating safely in this system so that everybody who's using the system, can travel safely. But it's hard when when they see others who may not obey those rules.
Right.
So I'll say,
Right.
we have a lot of conversations about our expectations, right, as a family, my expectations as a parent, my husband's expectations as a parent, right? No cell phone use when driving, no distracted driving, you know, no speeding, things like that. So they understand our expectations. I will say it was very interesting. My sons, would bike a lot before they got their licenses. And once they got behind the wheel, um, they actually came to me and said, well, now I kind of understand what you were saying when we were like biking to school, and I would tell them to be
Right.
careful at certain intersections or certain time. They said, because now I understand it, because sometimes in their view, sometimes, cyclists are, will come out of nowhere, or right, and as a
Right.
driver, they want to be cognizant of that. So I think there's an enhanced maybe understanding, which I think is good, of of other road users, right? And
Right.
how they might interact in the system. Um, but I also think that some of the eye test technologies, like, well, for example, some of the advanced driver assist technologies have actually been shown to be really impactful to safety for teen drivers.
Right.
And if any of you have teen drivers and you have a newer vehicle that has the different ADAS technologies, you probably have heard them go off, and has probably saved you a crash. I know for me it has. And so I'm thankful every day for those vehicle-based technologies. But I think that, that's also where something like vehicle to everything communications can really have an impact, because one example of what it can do is if you're a driver and you're pulling up to an intersection, a stoplight, and you're about to take a left turn, and you can't see a cyclist who's coming up on your left, it can alert you digitally before that cyclist is in view. So it can alert you to potential hazards or safety issues beyond your line of sight, so that you can
Right.
make a better decision, a safer decision. And so that's a really important, technology that I would love to see scaled very, very broadly.
Laura, I want to read back to you something else you said toward the end of your testimony, again, that really resonated with me. You said, I long for the day when I don't have to say to my children, call me when you get there safely. We can make that day a reality faster by leveraging technology in a more holistic way. Say more about that.
Yeah, so this really goes back to this idea that if we can actually start to include technology, from when we start to plan projects all the way to how we use it in operating our transportation system, it will allow us to better meet our goals of Vision Zero in a much faster time frame. A lot of times there's a lot of people who support Vision Zero, transportation safety goals, right, who talk about 2050. And my view is we can't wait for 2050, right? I mean, we have 43,000 people dying a year. So why would we not be using all of our tools to address that crisis faster? And in doing so, that means we need to be incorporating technology more holistically to not only, use technologies like automation and V2X that will prevent crashes from happening, but also these technologies like the data, the digital infrastructure, the artificial intelligence that can give us better information of what's happening on our system that we may not even be aware of, and then be able to address, those issues to create safer environments. And so that's really what I meant by that is I believe we have a moral imperative and a responsibility to use all of our tools, including technology, to try to meet those goals of Vision Zero as soon as possible.
Laura, in a moment, I'm going to ask you for some final words of wisdom, but I just want to summarize for our viewers sort of the whole theme and message of our Be Safe Together global road safety campaign, and that is for people to use empathy, use respect out there on the highway, recognize that every action you take behind the wheel affects the safety of everybody else on the highway, and to realize that if anybody on the highway is injured, we're all injured because we're all part of a common humanity. So with that in mind, Laura, what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off today?
Well, I think my words of wisdom would be, we've talked a lot today about, technology and how that can help, but I would tie it back to how all of these different tools, right? Technology being one of them. All of these different tools can actually improve lives, right? Can save lives, can make transportation much easier for people, more efficient, more seamless, can allow, you and I to get to work, to get home safely, our kids to get to school, to go to the doctors, to, visit our friends and family. That's really what transportation is about. And I'm really passionate about, and what I would really like to see is how can we do that in a way that provides safer, greener, smarter mobility for everyone. And you see that in the tagline behind me, right? That's ITS America's tagline, but we really mean it, right? It's not about the technology per se, it's about what that enables. And what that enables is this ability to lead a, safe and thriving life.
Laura, beautiful words of wisdom. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today, and thank you so much for joining us during this Global Road Safety Week. And to all our viewers, thank you for joining us, and let's all be safe together. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.